The decision to rent a secluded cabin in the woods had seemed like the ideal escape for my girlfriend Jane and me. We were both in our late 20s, and the daily grind of work and then partying at the weekends had started to take its toll. So when Jane found this cabin rental, right in the heart of the forest, it felt like perfect timing. We packed our bags with excitement, leaving the hustle and bustle of the city behind. The cabin was everything we'd hoped for: a cozy living room with a crackling fireplace, a rustic kitchen, and large windows that framed the serene woods outside. Between us, we could barely get a signal on our phones, but we both liked the idea of not being glued to our screens for once. The first day passed like a dream, exploring the cabin and the immediate surroundings. The scent of pine trees and damp earth filled the air as we revelled in the tranquility. After dinner, as sunset approached, we decided to go for a short walk while there was still some light. The woods looked amazing with the sun's fading rays dipping in and out of the trees, and as it darkened, we spent the rest of the evening back in the cabin, wrapped in blankets, warming our toes by the fire and sipping red wine, with the distant rumble of thunder adding a touch of excitement. That night, as we lay in bed watching a movie, the storm intensified. Rain rattled on the roof, and lightning painted silhouette patterns in flashes on the cabin walls. Suddenly the power went out, cutting the TV off and plunging us into darkness and silence, but we were so cozy and content, we decided it was a problem for the morning. Around 1 a.m, I woke up to the sound of a faint tapping. At first I thought it was just the rain against the window pane, but as I listened more closely, it seemed irregular, deliberate. I slipped out of my bed, my bare feet meeting the cold wooden floor. The tapping continued, growing louder and more insistent. It didn't sound like it was coming from the window. It was as if someone was knocking on the walls of the cabin. I grabbed the flashlight we'd left on the nightstand and made my way to the living room. As I crept through, the tapping suddenly stopped, and all I could hear was the rain and distant thunder. This was a totally unfamiliar place, so of course there was going to be sounds we weren't used to. Keen to get back to the coziness of bed and back to sleep, I made my way down the short hallway to the bedroom. As I sat down on the bed, Jane tapped me lightly on the back from underneath the warm blanket. "Don't look up, there's somebody at the window," she whispered with a tremor in voice, quickly explaining in a hushed tone that he'd been there since I got up and she'd been too afraid to move. From the corner of my eye, the momentary strobe of lightning lit up the windowsill to reveal the outline of someone peering in through the glass, only to disappear suddenly with the night sky returning to black. Without making out that I'd seen him, I slowly got back up and crept quickly to the living room. As I reached out and grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace, I heard Jane scream my name. I leapt back into the bedroom to see the man sliding the window open and exchanging our first eye contact. I swung at the man with the iron poker, smashing the window pane and knocking him to his feet in a shower of broken glass. I grabbed Jane, who had jumped out of bed and was standing at the entrance to the bedroom, ran through the cabin to the front door and out into the night towards our parked car. As we frantically approached the car, the panic escalated with my heart rate when I noticed the hood was popped and a bunch of connections had been pulled loose. "What the fuck?" we both said almost simultaneously. I looked round to where I'd knocked the man to his feet next to the bedroom window only seconds earlier, but he was gone. Nothing but shards from the shattered glass lying on the wet ground. There was a neighbouring cabin a few hundred yards away, and we took off running through the rain, hoping to find some help. We pounded on the door and they let us in, calling the authorities for us from their landline. When the police arrived, they searched the immediate area, but with the storm and the dense woods, found no sign of the intruder. The neighbours offered us a spare room for the night, and to help get our car looked at the next day. As dawn broke, we finally felt safe to return to our cabin and to collect what might be left of our belongings. To our surprise, nothing had been taken, and there was no trace of the intruder apart from the broken bedroom window. We called the cabin owner, who was so apologetic, even though we obviously didn't hold her accountable, and told us not to worry about the damage to the window. It wasn't exactly the relaxing getaway we'd hoped for, but driving home we felt lucky to have each other. and even though I try to stop myself dwelling on what could have happened, I'll always wonder what that man had been planning to do. I've always been quite an outdoorsy person, and venturing up into the heart of the Scottish Highlands for a weekend hike had been top of my to-do list for ages. So I packed my gear and set off on a solo adventure that would forever be etched into my memory, though not for the reasons I initially anticipated. The weather had been fickle from the start, with blankets of rain sweeping in and out constantly, but that's the Highlands for you, unpredictable and fierce. I trekked through the woods, my boots squelching in the muddy trails, and my backpack heavy with supplies for a couple of days' journey. As the day went on and the rain persisted, the dense canopy overhead provided some protection from the elements, but it also shrouded the woods in an eerie gloom. Solitude can be a double-edged sword, serene and unsettling in equal measure. It was late in the afternoon when I stumbled upon an empty bothy, nestled against the tree line. For anyone who doesn't know what a bothy is, they're small stone cabins dotted around the Scottish countryside in remote places for shelter. If they're empty, they're free to use. The sight of the bothy was a welcome one. It was tiny, with just enough room for a small fire pit at one end and room for 2 people to sleep at the other. It was primitive, but it was shelter, and that's what mattered most. As night fell, the rain outside started to come down much heavier. I huddled by the fire, the warmth seeping into my chilled bones. The wood crackled and hissed, providing a comforting counterpoint to the clicking rain on the stone roof. For a while, I lost myself in the atmosphere. Moments like those really made up for the muddy trekking. As the hours fell by, and the fire's glow illuminated my tiny shelter, the sounds of the woods outside became a chorus of strange and amazing noises. Every rustle, every creak, every unidentifiable sound seemed magnified in the confined space of the bothy. I told myself it was just obviously wildlife, perhaps a deer or a fox seeking shelter from the rain. But there was one out-of-place sound that suddenly made me flinch. An echoing, rhythmic knocking that seemed to come from somewhere in the distance. However, no sooner had I noticed it, it stopped, leaving only the relentless patter of rain as a backdrop. In the dead of the night, as I lay in my sleeping bag, sleep still eluding me, I heard something that made my stomach drop. Was it a faint voice? Was it just the wind? Or was it a dream? A product of my tired mind and the eerie atmosphere in the bothy? And then I heard it again, like somebody was singing mournfully into the wind. I lay there in the darkness, my heart echoing in my ears. The singing grew fainter and fainter until it finally faded into nothingness. I mustered the courage to crawl out of my sleeping bag and peek through the small window opening, but there was absolutely nothing to see except the inky blackness of the woods. Morning came, and with it a sense of relief. The rain had finally ceased, and I was eager to get on my way. As I stepped outside, my eyes fell upon something that made me drop my flask. 2 wooden posts stood just outside the bothy's door, each adorned with a sheep's skull. It was a bizarre and unsettling sight, one that left me with more questions than answers. Who'd been out here, and why? It didn't seem like a simple prank, not out here in the middle of nowhere. I quickly packed up, determined to leave the bothy and its mysteries behind. The hike went smoothly from that point on, and I reached the end of the trail without any further incident. The outskirts of town came into view, and I was eager to return to civilization. But as I descended from the woods, my foot landed on something unusual. A small circle of stones arranged on the ground, with 2 sheep skulls perched on top. Normally, I wouldn't think much of seeing stuff like that in the woods, I guess. But after the morning at the cabin, my mind raced with questions. Had someone been following me, leaving these strange markers along my path? Or was it just a bizarre coincidence? Over the years, I've thought back on that weekend in the Scottish Highlands, and the memory of the bothy and its unsettling aftermath has never left me. I may never know who or what was responsible for those strange occurrences up there, but one thing is certain: The wild and untamed beauty of the Highlands hides secrets that can haunt you long after you've left them behind. As childhood friends growing up in the remote countryside, my buddy James and I shared a sense of adventure that often got us into trouble. Our parents had warned us about the woods, the dense and dark wilderness that stretched out behind our homes. They told us it was off limits unless we were with adults, but we were young and curious, and that warning only fueled our desire to explore. One warm summer morning, we made our decision. We'd been talking about it for a while, and today was the day. Our bikes leaned against the shed, and we pedalled away from our houses, the countryside stretching out before us. The journey to the woods took us about 30 minutes, the thrill of adventure propelling us forward. We had a rough idea of where we were going, deeper into the woods than we'd ever been before. My parents' warnings echoed in the back of my mind, but I pushed them aside. The woods were alive with the sound of nature, the chirping of birds and the hum of insects. It was super calm and peaceful, but there was an underlying tension in the air. I guess because we knew we were doing something we weren't supposed to. After what felt like hours of biking through the winding trails and overgrown paths, we spotted a cabin in the distance. It stood among the trees, weather-worn and isolated. The sight stopped me in my tracks, but James was completely unfazed, grinning as he pedalled faster. We ditched our bikes and cautiously approached the cabin. It was old, that much was clear. The wood was worn and grey, and the windows were caked with dirt and grime, as if it had been abandoned for decades. Pushing open the creaking door, we entered cautiously. The cabin was dark, the only light filtering in through the grimy windows. Dust danced in the air, and the air smelled musty and stale. It was clear that no one had been here in a very long time. We moved further inside, our footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. The cabin was small, with just one room. At the centre there was a rickety table and 2 chairs, as if someone had been in the middle of a meal when they left. A layer of dust covered everything. As we explored, I definitely felt less confidence in my curiosity. There was something off about this place, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. That's when James noticed a trapdoor in the corner of the room, partially hidden beneath an old threadbare rug. With apprehension, we pulled back the rug and pried open the trapdoor. It revealed a narrow staircase descending into darkness. My heart was going ballistic at this stage, but we'd come this far, and I didn't want to be the one backing out. The stairs led us to a small, creepy basement. It was cold and damp, the air heavy with the scent of earth. Our flashlights revealed an assortment of oddities, rusty tools, faded photographs and etchings on the wall. But what caught our attention was a row of jars lining a wooden shelf. They were filled with a murky, brownish liquid, and inside each one something floated, tiny withered objects that looked disturbingly like human fingers. The realization hit us like a punch to the gut. We were standing in a cabin filled with macabre secrets, and the trapdoor above us held the chilling possibility that someone might return at any moment. Panicked, we scrambled up the stairs and out of the cabin, leaving behind the sinister discoveries we'd made. We didn't stop until we were back on our bikes, pedalling furiously in the direction of our homes. That day in the woods gave us an extra bond as friends. We often speculate on new theories about the cabin, and we never mentioned anything to our parents. Their warnings had been right all along.